Всем привет! С большой-большой задержкой, но мы все-таки выходим в эфир. Я очень надеюсь, что вы нас дождались, что вы не убежали отдыхать и заниматься чем-то более приятным в пятницу вечером, чем смотреть на нас, Лео. Но, во-первых, я приехала из Питера, прям с поезда прибежала. Лео сегодня провел тренинг целый день и прибежал с тренинга, тоже уставший, но из последних сил. И мы находимся сейчас в офисе BKC IH Moscow, и мы здесь находимся благодаря им исключительно. И большое им спасибо за то, что они нам дали такую возможность пообщаться сегодня с Лео и разузнать у него все о лексическом подходе. I will now switch to English because I would like to introduce you. So thank you very much for coming today, for having the energy.
Yeah, sorry for being late. Sorry, because I rushed here straight from the workshop I was conducting.
But that's okay. So Leo Selivan. Is it Leo or Leo?
Well, actually Leo, but many people call me Leo, so it's fine.
Okay,
either
like
way,
Leo
yeah.
Tolstoy.
Yeah, well, yeah, even though I would say Leo, yeah, either way, yeah, it's fine. Leo. Yeah.
Okay, he has been involved in ELT for about 15 years in all sorts of roles. Teacher, examiner, teacher trainer, senior teacher, materials developer, mainly with the British Council in Tel Aviv, but also in Cyprus and Turkey. In recent years, teacher training missions have taken him to Azerbaijan, Armenia, Italy, Russia, Ukraine, and many other countries. What a geography. And currently he's a lecturer in second language acquisition, teaching methodology, vocabulary teaching, using technology in the classroom. But as he says, the latter by demand rather by choice.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of integrating technology. I integrate technology, I just don't think it should be taught as a separate course.
Okay, so let's start. Your book is quite fresh out of print. It's called Out of the Print. It's called Lexical Grammar. It is by Cambridge University Press. And it's called Lexical Grammar. Yeah. By the way, congratulations on the publication. For people who don't know anything about it, the title seems a bit strange, even contradictory. Like, sorry, what do you mean by lexical grammar? What could you tell them?
Okay, so there are mainly two reasons why it's called Lexical Grammar. First, because the idea behind the book is we're trying to attempt the bridge between vocabulary and grammar. So vocabulary, lexis, so hence it's lexical and grammar. But also there's sort of more a marketing reason to it, which was entirely my idea. Because first of all, I think teachers love the word grammar in anything, and anything with the word grammar in it,
it's going to sell well.
So I thought, so when I told my editor Scott Honbury, we have to have the word grammar in it, because there were a number of times while the book was sort of in the works, we brainstormed a number of titles, working on emergent language, from words to grammar. Then Scott suggested at some point from words to grammar and then back to words. And then we settled on this one, and the commissioning editor of the series also liked the title. So, and another reason, is the second one? That's already the third one, yeah. So basically, because it continues sort of the line of other books on the same topic, which is Lexical Syllabus by the late Dave Willis from 1990. Then Lexical Approach by Michael Lewis, and I thought it would be, if we sort of go along the same lines, we call it Lexical Grammar, it would be sort of associated with those two great, I would say seminal works in the history of the lexical approach.
Thank you. And you use the word chunk quite a lot. And I think most teachers in Russia know what collocation is. Now we are used to this term, yeah. But chunk, for many people, may sound a bit weird or unfamiliar. What's the difference between a chunk and a collocation?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that teachers in Russian know the word collocation, because let's say maybe 10 years ago it was still a novelty kind of
progress.
word. Yeah.
Slowly.
So the word chunk, there's certain overlap. I would say collocation is a kind of chunk. But there are many, and the chunk, let me define collocation first, because there's sort of different approaches to defining collocations. for example, many corpus linguists would call also things like, take off, look after, all what we would call in, our ELT parlance, phrasal verbs or multi-part verbs are also known as collocations, because technically, from the linguistic sort of point of view, they are words that frequently go together with each other, so they are collocations. However, for pedagogical purposes, I would say collocation is a combination of two content words. So that's why, let's say, afraid of, it could be considered grammatical collocation, but my definition of collocation is more sort of a combination of two content words. So it has to be a verb plus noun, let's say, achieve a goal, or an adjective plus noun, like, a stunning view, or noun plus noun, or noun of, like a cup of tea would be a collocation, but not sort of, adjectives with dependent prepositions like frustrated with or afraid of, etc. And what is a chunk? Well, chunk actually, anything can be a chunk. I know it sounds like, because basically it's not so much, chunk is anything, and in my book I give quite a long definition. We worked quite hard on this definition with Scott Thornberry. There was lots of sort of going back and forth, because we really wanted to capture all the manners of sin, as it were. So I drew mainly on the work of Alison Ray. She's a well-known, she's quite one of the most prominent researchers on formulaic language, and David Wood, who's based in Canada. She's based in the UK. So I try sort of to combine, what they consider as formulaic expression, because that's a term. That's another term just to confuse the audience at this point.
Exactly.
Formulaic expression, multi-word expression. So a chunk, anything can be a chunk as long as it's not what it is, it's how you chunk it. So for example, you can teach I don't know, by combining the rules of grammar. It's present simple, we use do, then we contract it to don't, from do not, and we add the word know, and then we add up with I don't know. But you can also teach simply I don't know as a chunk without going into sort of structural analysis. I don't know, that's what you say. And you can teach, and you see the immediate advantage is you can teach it to beginners who don't know the grammar yet. They're not able to sort of to manipulate grammar to the point where they can produce I don't know. But if it's
so before they learn what is a noun, what's the order, word order.
Well, specifically in this case, before they learn the function of do, the auxiliary and not, do not. And they just memorize it, commit it to memory as a chunk, and use it when it needs to be used as a chunk. I don't know.
Okay, and naturally the next question, why is it so important to learn chunks?
Yes,
why
that's a
did you write a whole
question.
book
Yes.
on that?
So research shows that there's lots of research, there's a lot of evidence that that's the way L1 users, those for whom English is mother tongue, that's the way they acquire language. So it's not just single words, but lots of items, I would say, are acquired as unanalyzed wholes. So sort of many children hear sort of give me this ball, okay, and they sort of acquire give me with that give. It might even sort of symptom as gimme, without sort of segmenting it into give and me. And this sort of segmentation occurs later on, when they realize that actually it consists of two items: give, me. It's actually a verb followed by a direct object. I'll give you an example from second language acquisition. Many learners, for example, I'm sure with many beginners, you would use the chunk let's. It's one of the first you would say, let's do this. Yeah, so they are exposed to let's pretty early on, but only later do they actually realize, that it consists of let and us. And actually, just in this workshop that I was giving today, a teacher actually came up to me and said, Leo, also, it occurred to me fairly recently that it's actually let us. So it's the same process. So you learned let as a chunk, and only much later this, segmentation, this, division of this chunk into words occurred.
And so what's then? Should we only learn chunks? And as Stephen Kreischen famously said, the language learning will take care of itself. Yeah.
Well, yes, I know it might sound like very, controversial, but I would say yes.
Yeah.
Basically, that's how I personally would go about learning a foreign language. Like if I wanted to go to Portugal, have you been to Portugal?
No, never.
I've never been. It's been on my places to go list for like 10 years, maybe more. I've never been to Portugal, but if I wanted to go to Portugal, let's say, and if I wanted to learn some Portuguese, I would start with learning some kind of phrases, like what would we say, can I order something in a restaurant, or I would like something. So this is how I certainly would go about learning a language. I don't think Stephen Krashen actually used the word chunk himself.
No,
but he himself, and there's another famous, I'll reply to Polina's question with another famous quote by Stephen Krashen. I think he said it at a conference once in the 80s. When learners travel, they do not carry grammar books, they carry dictionaries. Or he may have said phrase books. I mean, certainly if he said phrase books, it even supports my argument even better. Because, it's a kind of like learning phrases that you would need in certain situations, like, renting a car, checking into a hotel, ordering food in a restaurant, going to the police, God forbid, you had your wallet stolen or something. So, and there lies also criticism of the lexical approach, which was, you see, I'm laying all my cards on the table, which Michael Swan once described as the phrase, I think he said, it's a phrase book approach. Like basically just learn lots of it. And learners do not sort of learn real grammar of the language, they just learn lots of phrases or chunks, the term I use.
Okay, so you gave a couple of examples for this elementary beginner level, but what about intermediate and upper intermediate and advanced? So should they go about learning in the same way?
Well, I think it's even more important for, because I think the argument sort of is only, it's suitable for higher levels and you need to, but actually, it's just as important for higher level learners. I mean, take writing, lots of writing, especially like academic writing, and students when you need to write essays for exam preparation, it's largely very formulaic. There's lots of, the main advantage of is, on all those linky words we use. Another possible solution to the problem is, etc. So it's even more important to learn those prefabricated chunks.
Okay, and to make the bridge to my next question. In 2013, it's 6 years ago now, you wrote an article in The Guardian, which, by the way, I'm going to post the link in the group in a couple of days. And this article was called, Why Has the Lexical Approach Been So Long in Coming? And in this article, you argue that over the last 2 decades, there's been so much research about it, and there's so much evidence that this is actually the way people learn languages. But as for 2019, to my best knowledge, we have only 2 books that employ this lexical approach fully, let's say. It's Outcomes and Innovations by Hugh Dell and Andrew Walkley. And a couple of days ago, they advertised a new course book, Roadmap. But this is it. Why we still have so many course books that take this classical approach or whatever?
Like more traditional grammar.
Traditional grammar.
Well, I think everybody should make a living. People who so I guess those who promote more, they should also, turn their ideas into. I mean, because they're different approaches. Okay, because it's what it is. It's an approach. So I think I wrote that article just to put it in context, okay? Because it's all about context, So it was the 20th anniversary of the lexical approach in 2013. It was 20 years since, when I say anniversary,
since the book came out.
The lexical approach, since the book,
Michael Lewis'
seminal book came out. And I think the same year it was Hugh Dell actually, at his University of Westminster, where he used to work, that's where there was this conference held to mark the anniversary. It was the same, so it came out around the same time. I think I published it sort of to promote that conference. By the way, Michael Lewis was very pleased with the article, even though I misquoted it. But then let's leave it to the reader, to the audience to find out if they can find my misquote. I actually made a mistake. in the article. But
I read it yesterday, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I just grammar consists of lexicalized grammar and not sorry. So I just it was just a sort of
you mixed it up a bit.
Yeah, a typo. But basically, why has it been so long coming now? Well, I guess it's much easier to sort of to package, and sell a course book that's based on discrete grammar items. It sort of lends itself probably more to being packaged and sold.
Let's study present perfect today for past experience.
Oh no, present. Yeah? You remember new headway, present perfect. You wouldn't see any kind of sign, any appearance of present perfect until unit 6.
Oh, sorry.
Because you shouldn't, you're not supposed to expose the learner to something they might not be familiar with.
Okay.
So I remember in my pre-lexical approach days teaching using new headway, intermediate, where present perfect didn't appear until unit 6, and we used to use the book would be used sort of over maybe I'm sure BKC maybe they do the same thing. But the textbook is used for like more than one course to to get more mileage out of a textbook. So once students bought it at the beginning of a course, if they re-registered for this, for the next term for the follow-up course, the same book would be used. So I remember in the school where I was working, it wasn't the British Council, we had to use only the first part of the book, the first 5 or 6 units, to make sure there's no overlap with the teacher who would be teaching, so let's say, the course after, sort of second part of the same level, intermediate, let's say intermediate 2. So, and when students ask me, but Leo, what about that present perfect? I said, no, we can't. It will be covered in the next course.
Don't
Unit
even
6.
dare.
Yes. So, but back to Hugh Della's course book, Andrew Walkley's course books. Like Hugh Della he's practically a household name in Russia. Like everybody knows his name. So when I give,
I believe that he has to be granted Russian citizenship pretty quick.
Yeah, like that I saw that what's his name? That guy who was stuck at the airport. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean I just can't think of his name.
There was Edward Snowden as well.
Sorry, yes. So I think he was stuck at the airport. So Hugh Della should be granted Russian citizenship. Yeah. And the French actor. Gérard Depardieu. Yeah. So Hugh Della should really join the ranks. Because
for good reasons.
For good reasons. No, I can't say anything because people say, but Hugh Della says, I mean, Hugh and I, first of all, we're good friends. We're like lexical buddies, as I refer to, sort of people who support the lexical, in favor of the advocates of the lexical approach, if you like. So we agree 70% of the time, but there are still some things we're not necessarily of the same mind on.
This is one of my questions.
Next question. So yes, going back to course book, innovation. I think innovations was a true lexical, even though they did use sort of using grammar, they had those sections called using grammar, it was totally lexical grammar. It wasn't sort of present simple, unit 1, present simple, unit 2, present continuous, or is it past simple? So, and then you go to unit 6. So it was called using grammar, but it was really grammar that you wouldn't normally find in textbooks. And my sort of journey into the lexical approach started with that book, with innovations, before I read the lexical theory. So it started more with practice. So I think innovations was more lexical, more true lexical approach. Lots of chunks. Each unit would start with sort of chunks. You have to you learner would have learned by the end of the unit. And I think outcomes they had to sort of compromise a bit. I hope Hugh Della is not listening to this, but I think they had to sort of, balance the, yes, we still want to, stick to our guns. There's a nice chunk, by the way. Huh? So adhere to our principles, but at the same time, the market needs and, learners' expectations, they want some grammar, so we have to infuse some grammar into it. I like in outcomes. My favorite, I would say, is the Upper Intermediate. It's a great book, but I still think innovations was true lexical approach. Okay.
So to sum up, you think that it's for more or less for the marketing reasons that it's not so much promoted yet, the lexical approach, I mean, that it's hard to sell.
Again, many textbooks have collocations. I mean, collocation boxes now. Yeah. Okay, so at least that's made its way. Collocations have made their way into mainstream course books. But yes, many course books still follow a grammar syllabus. I mean, I don't know why. I can't explain. Probably, needs of the easier to package, easier to sell, learners' expectations, maybe cultural reasons. Maybe in some countries that's what, teachers, the learners,
grammar
ministries of
presentation,
education,
exercises, freer practice, PPP.
Maybe that's what they used to.
Do you think it's going to change somehow?
Well, I think it has changed already. Like with lots of sort of more pages devoted to. Somebody mentioned this book today. Actually, I think it was Cutting Edge. Because I used to use Cutting Edge in the old days. It was the old Cutting Edge. I believe now there's the new Cutting Edge, probably third edition.
It's third edition now.
Third edition. So somebody in my workshop today in Moscow mentioned Cutting Edge activity where certain chunks were highlighted in sort of orange. And I was like, it's a great idea, because again, there's research that shows that enhanced input, because that's the term used in second language acquisition research to refer to anything that you do in a text to make certain features of the input more noticeable. So it can be bolding, highlighting, underlining, any kind of typographic enhancement. So it could be like highlighting in that case. So that's what they did. I mean, so some research is being taken. Maybe it takes time until sort of research seeps through from ivory towers, but it does penetrate sort of the market.
Yeah. Well, now I mostly work with exam courses, and I also noticed that 2014, 15, 16 editions already have this. I forgot what is the exact name of these exercises, but it's from Michael Lewis as well. When you first do matching, then you put it into sentences, and then you have questions for discussion. So it's kind of I call them three-way exercise. So you work with the same chunks in many different ways.
Well, and that's the key. I mean, with any vocabulary, even with single words. I mean, I don't teach many single words myself. I mean, I'm a fan of teaching in chunks. But even if you taught, words in single words, that's the way to go. The more learners manipulate vocabulary, the more they engage with it, the more likely they are to actually retain it. And because the first step is to remember, Yeah. Okay,
so we move on, and we send our greetings to Hugh Della, because my next question is, well, you mentioned that you have lots of not similarities, but I mean things you both believe in.
Well, in a way, he's my mentor.
But in what way what you do within the framework of the lexical approach is different from what Hugh Della does?
I think, I don't want to sound too, I think maybe perhaps my approach is a bit more learner-centered, a bit. Perhaps, I don't know, because, I've seen Hugh present and he's like lots of knowledge, but I may find sometimes Hugh can be a bit teacher-centered in his approach. I mean, that's not a bad thing necessarily, because I think it was Hugh Della himself who wrote this article in defense of TTT, the sort of often sort of disparage them, you should reduce TTT, increase STT. But Hugh Della, yes, but I mean, what kind of TTT? If it's like TTT where learners get
teacher talking time.
Teacher talk time, when learners get good model of language, then teacher should be doing, because you are the main, especially in EFL contexts. As opposed to ESL, as opposed when learners, learn English in England or Canada or in English-speaking countries. So for EFL learners, very often the teacher is the main source of input. Yeah,
and EFL in Russia, it's the context of EFL as foreign language.
As a foreign language, it would be Russia, China, anywhere, Brazil. So the way I think we had that sort of this exchange via our blogs, but also by the use of corpus. Corpus, sort of Hugh Della was a bit critical of going sort of overboard with corpus findings and consulting corpus too much.
He's a lot about intuition.
I think maybe I'm more into sort of consulting a corpus. So probably these are our main differences.
Okay, and the last question before we move on to the next topic. This is a question I asked Scott Thornberry and Hugh Della, and I just want to hear your opinion. Do you think that lexical approach and dogme have something in common?
Oh, interesting. You asked them both. I mean, on different occasions, because
not in the same room.
Yes, no, the same room. Yeah, wow. Because again, Hugh Della wrote this series of it was called. I remember the name. Dissing Dogme, It was a series of really critical blog posts against dogme. Do they have a lot in common? Yes. I mean, I think, and I know dogmaticians or dogmaticians might not like this, because this is one of the things one of the main criticisms of dogma is like many teachers say, but that's what I've been doing all the time. And I know they don't like to hear it. So when dogma sort of became this big thing, and I would say, and it wasn't in vain, I think into 2000 when Scott Thornberry published that seminal article.
2000, yeah.
But I think there was this big explosion of blogs in around 2010, 2011 on dogma. And I was going like, yes, but I mean, that's what I do anyway when I teach. I mean, my classes are conversation driven. I do build on sort of the input from the learner. And if I came with a lesson plan, but learners want to talk about, their haircut, let's just go along with that.
This famous example with how did you spend your weekend? I had a wedding. Yeah.
And then it's sort of, you use it as a springboard for the whole.
Yeah.
So they're perfectly, compatible in a sense, but I would still there would be lots of I would still, because I think my main problem with dogma is, okay, but how do you recycle all the language? Because, you have to how do you make sure the same topic emerges again in the classroom? Because probably the following week learners would like to talk about something else and not about the same topic. But in order to ensure that the same items are encountered again, this revision, so you can't really rely on it to emerge naturally. You have to have exercises to, let's start with vocabulary review. And I'm sure it's probably against the principles of dogma because, I prepared this vocabulary review. Let's do it. So...
But still,
yeah.
High five.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Many more questions. We'll probably here well into the.
Okay, we're gonna jump through some of them. Maybe, if you agree, we can make later an online interview when you're gonna go back home, have some rest. Okay. Maybe we can catch up. Because that's quite a lot of things I want to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, just let's talk a bit about Quizlet. I know that you're a proponent of Quizlet, and me too, by the way. So briefly, why do you believe it's so useful for language learning?
By the way, are you one of Quizlet ambassadors?
Yes.
So me too, but they didn't upgrade my account to teacher account. You know that? Because I thought if I applied to be their ambassador, and I have every right to be. I gave a webinar which was attended by more than 100 people for ITEFL a few years ago.
I'm also going to post the link
on Quizlet. I don't know if it's available. I think it's only for ITEFL members. You have to be.
I'm going to check.
But those who are members,
I guess I saw it on YouTube.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, so there's like a bypass.
Okay, I'm going to check it.
So, Quizlet. Yes, it's a great tool, and I think it does exactly what the things I talked about earlier when I was sort of responding to a question about dogma. So, we have to, language learning has to, you can't just rely on on naturally occurring conversations in the classroom. There has to be the bit where you actually get down and do the nitty-gritty. So you have to learn, you have to commit new vocabulary to memory. Otherwise, you can't just rely, and this is where Stephen Krashen would, of course, disagree, because language learning will take care of itself. Yes, I agree, it will take care of itself when it comes to grammar, but vocabulary, and again, research, in the last, let's say, 15, 20 years, there's been an explosion of research on second language vocabulary acquisition, and research shows that yes, deliberate, intentional vocabulary learning works. So it's when you actually sit and learn. So when vocabulary stops, because language, we like to see language as a tool for communication. But yes, it's perfectly justifiable. It's perfectly legitimate to see also language, specifically vocabulary, as the object of study. And like my example with Portuguese, yes, if I was going to Portugal, I wouldn't rely on, can I have something in Portuguese to occur naturally? I would actually make an effort and learn it before going to Portugal. So, and Quizlet is great because it's multimodal. There are different functions.
Yeah, it's 7 or 10 already.
Yeah, because they keep adding new ones.
Which one is your favorite, by the way?
Okay, my favorite one is the one that my learner's least favorite is Write.
Right.
It used to be called Learn, but now Learn has become also sort of this multimodal, different. Write is the one, is the productive one.
Yeah, when you type in
when you have to, because actually the way they're listed, it's not really it's not the order I would actually go about, because the idea is when you learn vocabulary, you would go from receptive to productive. So first you would do some kind of the matching activity, the one that used to be called scatter, when you have all the different items scattered on the screen. You have to drag and drop. Yeah, and I think on your smartphone it works by just sort of clicking. It was called match, and I think now both the computer version and the app, it's called match. So that's the easiest one. Of course, learners love it because all you have to do is just match. But write is actually when you have to. It's focused on retrieve, and productive knowledge is retrieval. So you're given no prompt. There's spell, but it sort of it dictates the word, and you only have to. So it's also kind of semi-productive because you still have to remember the correct form, the written form, how it's spelled. But write is basically you have to retrieve the word from memory. So you have to retrieve the word and produce it and write it correctly. So yeah, it's a great one, and there's one of the those two games. I think it's called Gravity now. That's the one that also works on the productive aspect.
I've never tried it actually.
Yeah, I know, it's a bit like you have to shoot asteroids falling from the sky.
Yeah. You have to be very quick.
Yes, it's time. Yeah. Some learners get stressed about it.
One more question about Quizlet. Some people say that they can't remember anything when they try to study words with Quizlet. They don't retain much, and we may call these people kinesthetic learners in a way. Yeah? But they say, I just study the set, I type in, but still I can't retain anything.
I'm surprised to say, because most of my learners all love Quizlet.
So you don't see these people much?
No, I don't. Maybe
people are a bit lazy.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's easy to say. Well, talking about kinesthetic, there's something I'm going to talk about in my plenary tomorrow. Yes. About the whole idea about learning styles.
Yes.
So kinesthetic learners, yes. How do they,
it's better to write by hand and not to study it on the screen. Or people have, there are people who don't read books from screen, and in the same way they say that I can't remember doing something from screen. I can't learn something.
Well, there is this again. There was research done on that actually writing. I mean, it wasn't conducted in the EFL context. It wasn't conducted in, I think, language learning context. But there were some studies, and they were sort of, quite highly publicized in the media, in the popular media, about how learners retain information better when they take notes the old-fashioned way by writing as opposed to typing on the laptop. Have you seen maybe those articles? There were maybe in the New York Times. There were quite a few.
Yeah.
I don't know if applied to language learning it would work. I mean, yes, I'm all for learners, writing in their notebooks, but write notebooks. Lexical, even though it's a lexical notebook, with examples, with collocations, it doesn't promote retrieval because you see it's in front of you, and Quizlet does. So it doesn't promote active recall from memory.
And this is where learning.
And this is where that's the hardest part, actually, to moving from receptive to productive.
And it's a nice bridge to my next question. I promised I'd jump.
Okay, good.
Questions. A problem that many upper intermediate advanced students encounter. They complain that they have a big passive vocabulary size, but their active vocabulary is much smaller. They are often frustrated that they can't remember a particular word in the moment of speaking. What can you advise to them?
Well, it might sound banal, or already banal, because learn language in chunks. I'm sorry, everything, we keep coming back to learning in chunks. Yes, it's a well-known thing, sort of, it's this post-intermediate learners always, bemoan the fact that they know more. When I really understand everything, I would like to speak like that, and I can't. Very often I find the problem is they know words only receptively. So they recognize words, but then they sort of half know the words. So they know what the word means, and they can recognize it when they read in context, but they don't know how to producers because they're not familiar with its sort of collocational range, or they're not sure what makes this word different from another. I mean, at that level, probably they know lots of synonyms. So why should they use the word conceal? I can always say hide. They probably do not realize that you can say certain other things with conceal that you can't say with hide, etc. So what I would suggest, it's teaching sort of lots of trying to connect words to certain specific contexts. So, for example, don't just teach the word spectacular. Teach the word spectacular. It's a word that you use when you talk about a movie. Hollywood blockbuster had spectacular visual effects. Okay, and I call this principle one is better than none. So you just learn one, but really good use of a word that would sort of click to you personally. I mean, it could be personal, it could be something else, and just stick to that. Use it in that context. So when talking about films, always use, and it's good for exam preparation, by the way. So it's called forced choice. No matter what, learners should use the word, like let's say you want them to talk about their favorite movie, use the word spectacular effect no matter what. Because they can always say, well, I like this movie, even though it doesn't have spectacular visual effects like most Hollywood blockbusters do, but I still like it for its great plot. So it's called like forced choice speaking. So they have to use certain number of certain chunks.
You give a certain number of words.
Use them no matter what.
Yeah.
And you can do the same in writing. Forced choice. It's called forced choice writing. So they have to use those chunks. Or, for example, I don't know, the word stunning. So connect the word stunning to, it's a word that you would use to describe view. And when we arrived at the hotel and opened the window, there was this stunning view of the bay. So again, one is better than none. Just learn word in a context that you are likely to remember and use it in, rather than just like learn the word and never know how to put it to good use.
Yeah, like 5 synonyms of exciting, but you don't know which one would
fit where,
fit.
Yeah, or like, you can take like magnificent, stunning, marvelous. Where do you use them?
Yeah. Good point. Thank you so much. So back to tomorrow. Sounds strange. Back to tomorrow.
Yeah. Back to the future.
Tomorrow's conference. You're gonna give 3 talks tomorrow, right? What they will be about?
Well, first of all, thank you BKC for inviting me. It's their first conference. International House. They hold lots of conferences around the world, but this is their first conference in Moscow. So I'm proud to be the opening plenary speaker of the first conference they've held here in Moscow. But by the way, how many branches do they have around Moscow? Do you know?
I don't know, because I live in St. Petersburg. I know there's quite a lot.
Because we're here, this is their main, the main office, their headquarters, but they have branches all over Moscow as well. This is just So the conference tomorrow, I'll be giving. Well, actually, it's 2 talks because so it's the opening plenary and the workshop, but it's like I'm doing the same workshop twice, sort of it's like a rerun. So it's actually 2 topics. So the first one, in the opening plenary called Misapplied Linguistics, I'm going to talk about about basically this disconnect between research and practice in ELT. How lots of research is either misapplied, like learning styles, kinesthetic learners, unapplied. So it's sort of, it's there. It shows that it's, this is what works. How come, materials writers do not take that evidence on board? But sometimes also how lots of research is inapplicable. It's sort of when you read it, okay, that's all very nice.
So what do I do with it?
In exam conditions, okay, so learners were in test conditions, they were asked to memorize something. Okay, as a teacher, okay, good to know, but what do I do? Okay, so this is my first, without giving too much away. I hope it's not too academic. It's not. I'll try to sort of to spice it up with some jokes and personal anecdotes. But I like research. I like reading research. I think I use the word research quite. If you run sort of concordances on this interview, probably the word research came up quite a few times. When I was answering your questions. So I like research, but I see lots of kind of inapplicable research. It's like, what do I do with it? Yeah. And the second one, which is a workshop. The one I'm going to do twice is called from grammatical mistakes to lexical opportunities, in which I talk about specifically writing, quite useful for exam preparation teachers, It's basically how to give effective feedback on learners' errors. So whether we should be correcting learners' errors or we should not be correcting, and how we should be correcting learners' errors. Because very often what many consider as grammatical mistakes are in fact, and I'm going to quote Hugh Deller here, it's a matter of, so what learners often need is not more grammar practice. Okay, so, you keep making mistake with, I don't know, third person singular, so take that page from a grammar book and do more exercises. Yeah. But what they need is more lexical input. They sort of need this huge injection of more lexes and maybe of more chunks that contain the grammatical structure. So they're sort of, sort of drilling third person singular, just teach learners those chunks with, it doesn't matter. It makes no difference, sort of, that would use the third person singular. So more lexical input instead of more grammar correction.
So, and the very last question about your book, once again. Who do you recommend your book to? How can teachers use it?
Well, like all book in the series, because it's part of the Cambridge Handbooks for Teachers series. It's the latest one. And I think it's the 20th one that was edited by Scott Thornberry. He's as far as I remember, he's the third editor of the series. The original editor of the series was Michael Swan. Then it was taken over by Penny Orr, and then Scott Thornberry took over. So he's the current editor of the series. So like all the books in the series, it sort of follows the same format pretty much. So you have sort of this theoretical part, which is in my book, it's quite long by the standard of the series. And even, the way it is now, it's quite long. I had to cut it by almost half, I would say. It was pretty long originally. So, and then the rest of it is lots of activities or, sort of ideas how to, do various things in the classroom. Some of them kind of are standalone ideas, which you just can use this activity as is. Others are more kind of suggestions how to supplement any other materials teachers might be using, their course books or anything. But many of them are not sort of activities as such. I mean, even though they're sort of packaged as activities, it's really more ideas. So I hope teachers would not just take, my list of chunks, which I gave as an example of an activity, but actually use those activities as a framework for creating their own material. Sort of taking, the language that comes up in their lesson and sort of and doing the same activity as the book suggests. And also, since you're asking about the book, I would say my favorite part is the rationales. So under each, this rationale sort of section under each activity, and we kind of departed from the series format. It wasn't in the previous, but I think actually they liked it so much that they asked the other author who was working on another book at the same time to do the same. So
you started a new tradition.
Because they really like this idea of including rationales under each activity.
And it's useful for those who do deltas.
Probably, and it's also useful for those who will sort of skip the introductory theoretical part. I'm not going to read all that boring bit. I will just go straight to the activities. So that's why. So because remember I told you I had to cut it by half. So all that half that didn't go into the theoretical part, into the introduction. So I interspersed it throughout the book as little sort of rationale. So why are we doing this way? Why it's important.
As I said, as a person who just finished module 2 on Delta, so when I saw it, I said, thank you so much. It's going to be so useful.
Do you know I don't have a Delta. Okay. I don't have a Delta, and I recently applied to be a CELTA tutor. CELTA tutor, trainer, do you say? Yeah.
CELTA trainer.
Trainer, and I was rejected. By Cambridge because I don't have a Delta, and I think the main problem is I don't have a Delta module 2, so I might have to do Delta module 2.
Good luck.
I use my book. Yes,
you can use your book. Okay, thank you so much. I think we have to stop, and sorry we won't have time for questions, but if you have questions, so type them in as comments. And I promise to forward all the questions to Leo, and hopefully we're gonna find some time to maybe do it, just online, a second part of the
follow-up.
A follow-up. Yes, sort of. Thank you very much, Leo.
Thank you for having me here.
Yeah, good luck tomorrow with opening plenary.
Yes. Wow.
Thank you, everyone. Спасибо всем большое. И не забывайте, что завтра, начиная с 10-15 утра по московскому времени, я буду выходить с короткими, небольшими интервью, минут на 15, на 10, со спикерами конференций, которых я представляла вам на прошлой неделе. Так что всем огромное спасибо и хорошей пятницы. Не переключайтесь.